One of the most common unit compositions for the Zerg versus Terran matchup when you are playing with the Zerg pieces and your opponent is going for bio armies is the Mutalisks Bane style. The strategy where you focus on Mutalisks, Zerglings and Banelings. However, there's one issue with that composition, and I know that many of you know this feeling as well. If you're not on top of your control, you will in many instances end up losing the game when you clearly don't mean to. For example, let me give you a couple of examples, and for any Zerg players I do apologize in advance, but let's say you're accidentally flying your Mutalisk over a bunch of Marines. The Marines use Stimpack and they all end up dying because you didn't pay attention to them for like 3 seconds. Or say, for example, you're accidentally not paying very close attention to your armies, and generally speaking, you just walk across the map, a Widow Mine happens to connect and you lose all of your Banelings. Or say, something that has been a lot more popular as of late, your Terran opponent is adding in one random Thor, it completely messes up the Mutalisk AI and it gets shot down absolutely instantly, and you end up losing the game because you're mis-microing. Now here's the thing, if you're watching professional gamers, right, generally speaking that doesn't happen, but even at that level, even above like Grandmaster League, right, you will still see people mis-micro, and in many instances, in particular like the lower you go on the ladder, the more difficult it becomes. Now I have played hundreds of hours of Mutalisks Bane and I still do make that mistake plenty of times as well. So over the course of the last couple of months, I've always been trying to replace the Mutalisks with other units as well. If you've been watching the live stream at all, you've seen me trying to replace them with, for example, Infestor, or sometimes even Hydralisk, or for example, Ravagers, or basically anything that can potentially clean up dropships, because in many instances, that is like the primary task of the Mutalisk, to really sort of try, to really sort of like take control of the battle on the ground, but then also pick up any kind of dropships that happen to be flying across the map. And in most of my scenarios where I tried that out, it really just didn't work that well. I mean, they definitely were not good enough to replace the Mutalisk with, and in all honesty, it just sort of slowed me down even more. Now, one of the strategies that I've seen Solar execute quite a bit as of late is to not sort of like replace the, and by the way, Solar is one of the very best Zerg players in the world, in case you are unfamiliar, but instead of replacing them with like another like tech-based unit, I saw Solar go super heavy into the queens instead. And what he does, and while he's actually saving up a lot of those queens and he's going for a reasonably, big amount of Zerglings and Banelings and completely skipping out those Mutalisks, what that allows him to do is save up additional gas to go up towards a quick hive instead. And one of the nice things about it, and whenever you do replace your queens, obviously you're gonna have a lot of transfuses available for you. In many instances, whenever you're in that scenario, you can sort of keep your Ultralisk alive for a very, very long time. And this used to be something that was quite popular back in the day, and I really haven't seen a lot of people play. And I've been trying it out over the last couple of days. For example, in the game that you are watching right here, which I played just a few days ago. I've been trying it out over the last few days, and it's actually been working out like a charm. Of course, right, if you are a Mutalisks Bane type of player, you are probably going to be better off just playing Mutalisks Bane. And if you are in High Grandmaster already and your control is on point, props to you, Mutalisks Bane is the way to go. And of course, Solar, even though he definitely is extremely good at Mutalisks Bane as well, I mean, it's some of the best in the world, he actually has been favoring the style quite a bunch. And I've been trying it out, and I've honestly gotten pretty impressed with it. I've got a really good win rate. Now, there are a couple of things to try and keep in mind, okay? This doesn't like take the micro aspect of Mutalisks Bane out of the equation, because we still do have obviously Queens, Zerglings and Banelings as well, like Queenling Bane, and you still do need to micro. But the nice thing about the Queens is that for the most part, they don't require nearly as much babysitting as, for example, the Mutalisks do, right? Like with Mutas, you need to keep on paying attention. As long as you've got your Queens hotkeyed, usually you can quite easily send them forward. But there are obviously also some pretty obvious downsides to it. For example, if your opponent is going for heavy drop play, you need to make sure that you are on top of defending that. Because if you're not, and you're not paying extreme close attention to where your opponent's dropships are located, of course you're gonna end up getting dropped and you will end up losing the game. And I'll give you a couple of tips on how to defend that sort of thing in just a little bit once it also goes down in this particular match. But as you may have noticed by the title of the video, why is this match called Winning Without Attacking? And here's the thing. In quite a couple of the games that I've played where I'm going for this style, my opponent just keeps on attacking over and over and over again. I end up defending, and eventually I get up to that maxed out army. And as soon as they see that army, they just sort of leave the game. They just sort of leave the game right then and there because they've realized that once +3/+3, chitinous plating, which is the armor upgrade for the Ultralisk, as well as adrenal glands, the attack speed upgrade for the Zerglings, once that hits, usually they're just sort of like dead anyway, so they just sort of leave the game straight up. And I've had that in quite a lot of games actually, probably more than I've had to like move across the map. So in this particular instance, yes, I am gonna move out across the map a few times to try and do some counterattack damage, but really, I never move across the map to try and deal with my opponent's army. Instead, I'm just sitting back, I'm trying to defend to the best of my abilities with Queens, Zerglings, and Banelings, while very greedily teching up as well. Now, I'll show you the production tab just to sort of show you what exactly is going on in this particular match, right? So I ended up scouting exactly what my opponent was doing. If you have a quick look right here, I can see the third command center. I noticed that it was going to be the double drop play. So I've got my queens ready to go. Now, you do need to sort of treat your queens as Mutalisks, okay? So you need to make sure that you're target firing down the Metafax here. So that is exactly what I'm trying to achieve now with the queens that I have, not the Mutalisks rather. And of course, if you can, you want to try and target fire down between the different Metafax as well. And on top of that, keep your queens alive by using the transfuses. Now, of course, I can hit them from the low ground here as well. And one other thing that's been helping out a lot is a properly placed and timed spore crawler. So the spore crawler in the main does indeed end up picking up one of them. I've been going for a bunch more static defense when trying to get this game underway and when trying to sort of play this strategy. But other than that, I approach it the exact same way. So I start off with +1/+1, switch into the lair-based strategy, and then once I defend the, the early game aggression, for example, the 60 marine drop like my opponent opts for in this one, I then start adding on additional gases, and I then start adding on my lair and then the Baneling nest eventually here as well. So it's pretty straightforward, right? Like, we're not playing anything super differently. In fact, as soon as we get to the lair, I am basically putting up my infestation pit at the same time as I would normally put down my spire. So it sort of feels similar, except that you have to be really on point in a couple of areas. So first off, okay, one of the areas you need to be extremely on point in is going to be the creep spread. Creep does a couple of things. First off, it obviously gives you vision and your units are allowed to move around a bunch faster, right? But I've been playing a lot of random and I've realized that when you are going up as a Terran player against Zerg and you are indeed playing bio and they're playing, a Zergling Baneling based strategy, you have to engage on creep extremely carefully. You can't just walk up there because there may very well be a bunch of Banelings waiting for you. So what it really gives you is time, okay? You need to make sure that you get your creep spread on point because you give yourself a lot of time. On top of that, and let me try and showcase that to you just right now, you need to make sure that you're not keeping all of your army in one little area. If you're replacing your army with queens instead of Mutalisks, you really need to make sure that you're keeping your army in different areas on the map. Queens and Zerglings and Banelings are plenty fast, but they're not as fast as Mutalisks are, right? So you need to make sure that you keep your army spread out. So one of the most common mistakes I see a lot of Zerg players make that I'm coaching is when they're playing the game, they just sort of leave all of their army, say, hanging out right here, right? But there's absolutely zero reason for that. If your queens are spreading creep as much as they should, and I mean, my creep spread is reasonable here, it's nothing amazing, you should see the incoming push plenty in time, and you then have time to move your army over. Instead, what I am trying to do here is spread my army in different locations. Basically, I'm trying to think here from the Terran's point of view, what is like the most droppable location? And in this instance, it's definitely the main base, and then also my quickly taken third here. Those are the bases that are more than likely gonna be dropped, and of course, if I need to, I could even get some units here in the natural as well. So I'm trying to like manually split up all of my units that I've got to go to the different areas, and that way we should be able to defend against incoming drops. The same goes for the queens. I could be controlling those a bunch better, to be completely honest with you, but I'm really just trying to make sure that I'm set up here. Now that we're at lair, I'm gonna try and get my +2/+2 going. I'm gonna try and get my Baneling speed going, and then we'll go straight into an infestation pit. So notice right there, right? 8 minutes, infestation pit already. Now in this particular match, I didn't actually realize exactly that I already put down an infestation pit. I actually really liked the timing of my first one, but then I accidentally end up putting up a second one, which I would not recommend, but you can get the idea, right? Now, even though I said I wasn't going to be attacking, of course, we do still want to try and threaten a couple of run-bys, and that's exactly what I'm setting up here as well. So I do move on top of this army here, and then I decide that he's got plenty to defend here. He's got double bunkers set up. I'm just not going to engage anymore for the remainder of the game. But then obviously, in many instances, you do still want to make sure that you at least threaten run-bys, so they leave some of their army at home as well to defend, and it can't just rally everything across the map. But regardless, I mean, I engaged there for like 3 seconds. I think I may have killed one marine, probably not even. And you know, like, that's just really threatening run-bys. For the most part, I'm just sitting here. I'm just defending here. I'm keeping my units spread out. I'm trying to spread as much of my creep, but more importantly, I'm trying to get a hive up as soon as I can. So usually you don't want to start your hive up any later than like 8.5 to 9 minutes. Now, I'm actually honestly a little bit late in this particular match. Could have started it up a little bit faster. There, I do eventually started at 9 minutes and a couple of seconds into it. But I'm trying to make sure that I'm defended and ready to go against any kind of pressure that my opponent can be throwing at me right here. So notice my hotkeys, right? I've got separate hotkeys for all of this stuff, and as soon as I realize that my opponent is planning to move across the map, that is also the moment where I start moving all of my army towards this. And as you can see, I've got plenty of time to try and deal with this. Now, like I said, this does not get rid of all of the micro that you need to do when you're playing the Ling Baneling sort of style, right? But it does make it significantly easier because you've got one entire control group to not really worry about, right? When you're going for the Mutalisks, they really do need babysitting, and I find Ling Baneling styles, like just pure Ling Bane styles, right? Significantly easier to control than playing Mutaling Bane, because in many instances, it just gives you a lot more time. Now, once again, if you are a professional gamer and you're somewhere along the higher ranks of Grandmaster, you probably are not going to have any issues in that regard. But for any of you that are below that, and let's be honest, probably most of you are, I mean, me included as well. I'm playing right around 5.2-ish MMR right now. And then also right around Master 1 or so. I find it to be significantly easier to play the Mutaling Bane style, but without Mutalisk and replacing them with Queens instead. And even though I can't give you like a guarantee that this is going to be the best style against Terran ever, it's been working out like an absolute charm here, right? So I've got my hive done. I'm gonna go ahead and get my Ultralisk Cavern. We'll be able to start up the Adrenal Glands upgrade, which is the attack speed for the Zerglings, and then the +3/+3 upgrade. And that's really it. Now notice here, I am moving off creep. I actually think this is a mistake. There's zero reason for me to move off creep. If you can take engagements on creep, you want to do that every single time. And if you're spreading a lot of creep, it's much easier to go ahead and do so, right? So I don't have like a gazillion queens, by the way. At this point, I've only got 7. I've had a few games where I do indeed get more than that, but you get the point, right? I'm really not trying to get a super tech-based heavy army. I'm just trying to tech up with really solid upgrades instead, and eventually we're gonna get all of these ultras out. Now, once again, trying to micro against these Widow Mines to the best of my abilities, splitting up my forces here as good as I can do, and of course, I once again have my queens target firing down those medevacs to really try and force them back. And once more, I managed to go ahead and do so without really taking any unnecessary damage. Now, of course, right, while the micro aspect may be a little bit differently and a little bit easier, the macro aspect of this game is still the exact same. You need to be on point when it comes to your Zergling control as well as your queen control, right? But you really need to make sure that you've got enough larvae available here as well. And here's what ended up happening. My opponent scouted exactly what was going on. If you have a quick look at what he's got, I mean, he just now started mining this base. But the real issue here is that he's got no liberators out whatsoever, and he ends up GGing. Maybe a little bit preemptively, I mean, it's hard to say, but I've had quite a couple of guys do exactly this sort of thing to me as soon as they scan my natural and they see the Ultralisk Cavern. So the reason why he left is because he knows he's gonna be behind in upgrades. Usually the Terran player and the Zerg player are reasonably even when it comes to the +3/+3 upgrades, but you can see his +2/+2 is just 20 seconds from finishing right now, and my 3/3 is already underway, and that's a huge lead there. That's like 100 seconds advantage that I have. Plus on top of that, as soon as my Ultras come out, he's gonna need something else than Marines and a bunch of medevacs to deal with it, and he's gonna be able to switch into Liberators, of course, and eventually get a reasonable counter out. But that is the moment where I would start getting really aggressive. As soon as I get my, you know, maxed out army and a lot of ultras, and I can bring my queens across the map for the transfuse, that is the timing where I'm starting to be aggressive. But all things considered, in many instances, you can just sort of pick up the victory before you even really get to that point. I hope this at the very least gives you an idea of how to play the Zerg versus Terran matchup when you're going up against Bio in a bit of a alternative way, I suppose. I've been practicing it a lot. It's been a lot of fun. So if you're gonna go ahead and give this a try, let me know down below in the comment section of the video. While you're at it, go ahead and hit that like button and make sure you subscribe so you get a notification as soon as I upload more. And of course, you can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Links are in the description. I want to thank you for watching. Have an amazing day. Do not forget to smile, alright? And I'll see you in the next one.